A 10-year-old girl is killed, her father and his girlfriend charged in her murder. The school she attended, police, and others say they called the Department of Child Safety repeatedly. So could her death have been prevented?
Taking you behind the investigation. This is the Arizona's Family Investigates podcast.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the podcast. Nicole Kreitz got the first tip about this awful case, and then really several of us in the newsroom started looking into it. So what did that tip say?
I remember it distinctly. So we're in the newsroom, and the genesis of it was we were trying to track down what was going on with that 16-year-old pregnant girl, Zariah Dodd, who was murdered in the park in Maryvale. I reached out to, once I learned that she was in a group home, she was in state care with foster, I reached out to a foster care advocate who has been amazing in the Valley. And I said, are you familiar with this case? Are you helping the family? And she says, I'm working that case, but I'm working another. I need you to look into this 10-year-old girl who was recently reunited with her father, that she has multiple siblings, that the state, DCS, removed them from the home and did a family reunification, gave all the kids back to dad, and lo and behold, this poor little girl was murdered at the hands of her own father and his girlfriend. So I was told it's Northern Arizona, not quite sure if it was Winslow or where it was, but you need to check this out. So we started working together with our assignment desk and making calls, trying to figure out which county it was, tracked down Apache County, and just started doing a little bit of digging to get to the bottom of, we're like, is it possible that we have another child killed in a horrific situation here?
Yeah, and it really seems that every twist this case takes, it's just more disturbing than the next. And all of the details that you got from that original tip really checked out. So often we hear there were dozens of calls to DCS and we're not really able to confirm that. But in this case, there really seems to have been such an effort by police, the school, neighbors to really get attention on this family and this girl and these kids, and it just didn't seem to happen.
So many advocates, and I think the heartbreak, there's a million ways that this story is heartbreaking, but I've talked to family members, I've talked to foster care advocates, I've talked to law enforcement, and all those sources. It gets very sensitive when you're talking about obviously sensitive information with active cases because you have her biological siblings, her younger brothers who've survived, and we're still trying to figure out what's going on with the custody of those little boys who police have said that there was evidence they were abused as well. So it's terrible, but also to figure out kind of tracking back what was the genesis of this, how long had the abuse been going on, why were they originally removed from the home, and that there was a fight to not have them reunified with dad. But I've heard from a lot of DCS caseworkers that in recent years, there has been kind of more of a push from the administration to say, let's make every opportunity, regardless of how people might have opinions on this or otherwise, let's make every attempt to reunify with bio parents. So I was told that dad, Rebekah Baptiste, and his girlfriend, Anicia Woods, thank you, went through some kind of like a parenting course or something along those lines where they got certified by DCS. They fought to get the children back, pulled them out of a foster home they had been in for years. And there was a push like, is this the right move? Is he stable and what? And then even after that, there were call after call after call, neglect, late to pick up from daycare, no show for after school, kids showing up to school hungry. You talk to the school yourself, allegations of bruising, other issues, the kids saying, I don't feel safe or I feel scared, and making claims like this, repeated things. She ran away. We can get into those details a little bit more about her even running away, showing up at a quick trip and saying, my dad's girlfriend is abusing me, and ended up in a hospital. There's more than 100 pages of medical reports. And how did she end up dead? Everyone's calling, saying, SOS, do something, save these kids. And she's dead.
I know it is just so heartbreaking. I want to take a step back because we learned a lot of details surrounding the specifics of her killing in that first court hearing that her father and the father's girlfriend appeared for. And during that hearing, we learned that Rebekah and her two younger brothers were staying in this yurt situation in rural Apache County. We learned that they moved there over the summer. It's not clear why they left Phoenix to go to this rural yurt to live there. But we did learn some disturbing details about their treatment while they were in that spot. Prosecutors laid out details of missing toenails, bruising all over their body, the three kids being starved. We want to play a little bit from that proceeding.
The above findings are highly concerning for child physical abuse, child sexual abuse, and torture, which is a surprisingly, shockingly strong word for a medical doctor. That
doctor was a doctor at Phoenix Children's Hospital where Rebekah ultimately died.
Yeah, and so it sounds like Anicia was telling others that she was the children's mother. She'd been in their life for years, living with their biological father, Richard, and she made all sorts of claims from law enforcement sources I've spoken with and other family members saying every time they would make a call, and whether it's police or DCS, trying to run down what do we find out about this allegation? It's like she had an excuse for everything. The brother has a scratch on his neck because he twisted away from me as I was trying to reach for him or something. Or when the SRO went to the house, she's got a black eye. It's because she got hit in the face with a ball at a friend's house or something along those lines. But it was like every time there was some kind of excuse. And even that morning of, when they found her, it was like, she ran away. Neighbors found her and tried to tell officers something. She had ODD, opposition defiant disorder, and just makes up all these claims. She's self-harming, things like that. But it's like, how many times, when you look at the volume of allegations, do these excuses hold up?
It's a really good point. And that's what some school officials, some school administrators had said was so frustrating, that as time went on, they just didn't buy these excuses anymore. And it seemed like when they spoke to DCS was basically just focused on the fact that the dad had this stable job, was able to provide an apartment, for the kids to live in, had enough money to provide food. And so they just didn't seem to sort of dig any further into this. And as you were, mentioning the Anicia Woods situation and what she was saying, the 911 calls really kind of are a testament to what you were saying. They shed light on exactly what happened on July 27th, the day that ultimately she went to the hospital, Rebekah. In them, Woods calls herself Rebekah's mother, says she's unresponsive, not breathing, but she doesn't express the kind of urgency or concern that you'd expect.
She's been running away, but she ran away today, and when the neighbor found her, she's just been completely unresponsive. I'm sitting here giving her breath.
I'm sorry. And you're coming to Holbrook, or are you going towards Concho?
We're going towards Holbrook. We're told there's an EMS station in Holbrook.
Okay, and then what's going on with your daughter?
She had ran away. This is like the third time now, and she still hasn't even really bounced back from the first time. But when the neighbor found her, said that she was just almost gasping.
And you really hear Anicia there. She seems more focused on the running away part than she does about Rebekah, this girl she's referring to as her daughter, being unresponsive and not breathing.
Yeah, because it's like, how can you be giving her breath if you're talking to me on the phone in a very calm manner? It just doesn't add up. So 20 minutes later, she calls back to 911, and her explanation for what's going on just doesn't seem to add up. Take a listen.
Unresponsive, unconscious, and unable to breathe for herself.
Okay, so she's still unconscious, unresponsive?
Yes.
Is she breathing?
I'm breathing for her.
What do you mean?
I am putting my mouth around hers and breathing the air in her lungs.
And if that's not disturbing enough, Woods calls back a third time. Here, the dispatcher is asking her to do CPR on this 10-year-old. And she seems to be vamping for time. She doesn't seem to be interested in actually doing CPR.
Have you got her to the flat ground, solid ground?
Yeah, she's in the car.
Okay, I need you to put
You're gonna walk
her
outside.
on the ground.
On the rocks?
I need her on a flat ground so that you can administer CPR. Let me know when she is on the ground.
Okay. No, you say.
Do you know how to
On the
administer CPR?
Yes, I do, unfortunately. I hear the EMS coming.
So yeah, even with what would seem an inherent emergency from someone who's like, I'm her mom, just like you said, you'd think, get her down on the rocks. You'd think there'd be more urgency. Okay. And then you'd think that she'd be out of breath because she's trying. And even the dispatcher's like, are you starting that? I'm going to wait for them. What's going on here? So I looked at the police report of what happened here, and the first responding officer starts CPR. Then the EMS shows up. And then while that's happening, that officer says he looks down and he's able to see bruising on her legs, on her hips, on her left eye. She has a cut lip. She's malnourished. She's jaundiced. She's yellowed. And he's like, something is not right here. They see the other two kids in the car. And when they ask the kids, what happened here? They're following the same script. It seems like they've been kind of coached by dad and girlfriend to say, she ran away, a neighbor found her, but they're holding up the same kind of story. And now we know that police are saying those kids, there's evidence of physical and sexual abuse with her little brothers as well. Earlier, Amy, you mentioned we don't know for sure why the family moved up to northern Arizona, but the family members I've spoken with and law enforcement say this follows a very common pattern. When families who are engaging or abusers are engaging in bad behavior, they're beating their kids, they're getting called repeatedly by DCS. They can feel the heat's on, they pick up and move. So the school, when you spoke with them, I know that you said that they had this urgency, like, we are going to put in calls, we're going to do something because we know he's intending to pull them out of school. And they were very concerned that exactly how this played out was what they were intending to do with her.
We've had social workers, concerned students make statements that they were concerned about their classmate, as well as teachers, administration, outside service providers who work with the students, all concerned that there was abuse or neglect happening at home towards all the children.
Yeah, and that's really the concerning part that these these educators sort of laid out. They said that anytime there was some kind of break from school, they were concerned for these kids because they knew when these kids were coming in, they were hungry and they asked for second and third meals frequently throughout the day. And so, and quite frankly, they were concerned about their well-being. And so if they couldn't have eyes on the kids during breaks, there was some real concern about what shape the kids would be in.
Yeah, and this, again, is Empower College Prep. It's a charter school in Phoenix. It's real close to the apartment where Dad was living with the three kiddos. And it's frustrating because they took meticulous notes. And when they first told us, when we first reached out, asking them, because I had heard, hey, on these case notes and everything, the school has clearly been a strong advocate that something was going on wrong in this home. So when we reached out, we first kind of like, the backstory on this is kind of crazy. Like we heard, okay, it could be, it's a charter school, they wore uniforms, it must be close to where they lived and stuff. So we're triangulating which school could it be and everything. So we finally figure out where it was. They were very responsive because not only did they want to do what's right, but they also are like, something went wrong here, right, Amy? And they were pretty willing to speak with you about, like, on our watch, we're not going to allow this to just get swept under the rug.
Yeah, I was really surprised. Frequently in these situations, you reach out to the school to sort of get some information, and they're really reticent to talk.
Right.
In this situation, they were very clear to say, no, we called DCS 12 times over the last 2 years. DCS did not act. And they actually sat down for an interview, part of that you just heard. And in that, they explained that they had an SRO at the school. That SRO went to their home, and it was because Rebekah had been out of school for more than a week. So there was some concerns about truancy, but also her well-being. He showed up with someone else from the school at their home. And it was sort of surprising, they explained, because they wouldn't allow the SRO into their home, and they would only allow him to talk to the kids one at a time with them present, which was really concerning behavior. And then when they spoke with Rebekah, they saw that she had a black eye, and there wasn't really a good explanation for how she got that injury.
Yeah, and so I've heard from, again, law enforcement and family sources who have said when they went there, Anicia answers the door, and she made up some kind of like, oh, we had a family funeral. It's, that's why they haven't been at school, and everybody's fine. And the principal and SRO say, well, can we just talk to them? They wanted to put eyes on them. And immediately, once they saw Rebekah, the principal said, whoa, what happened? What happened to your eye? Because it was clearly a black eye. And I was told without hesitation, she didn't look at Anicia, or there was no body language like she was creating a ruse or a story. Rebekah just offered, I was at a friend's house. I got hit in the face with a ball. So it was tough because then you have law enforcement. And I asked very pointedly, because to me, I'm like, DCS is welfare investigations. They are custody investigations. PD is a mandated reporter. Like, if you see evidence of physical abuse, like I think of the Gabby Petito case. Okay, that was domestic violence between romantic partners, whatever. We're dealing with a family of domestic abuse, whether it's girlfriend and dad against the child or whatever. But if you know the circumstances of that, you see a human, a little 10-year-old girl who shows up with a black eye, you're there concerned. I'm here to check on the welfare of sweet little Rebekah. She shows up at the door with a black eye. And I asked, what right do you have to pull that child out of the house to do a forensic interview? Because that's like where you get detectives who are well-trained in making sure that you're not planting seeds, like kind of leading the witness. Children are very susceptible to that. So law enforcement, there are certain individuals who are specifically trained for forensic child interviews. And so DCS has these experts in their, who work with them, who are well-trained to do that. And so does police. So I was like, if you see a child with a bruise on their face, and the way they explained it to me is like, there's a difference between an exigent circumstance. It's like you witness violence. You can immediately make an arrest. You can immediately ask for, whatever. Then there's probable cause. That's how you can make an arrest. That's how you can get a search warrant. And then it's, what was the other word? There's all these different little angles. It's like, what is a substantive threat and all these different things. But it doesn't have to be an exigent circumstance for them to remove the child from the home. But that was the big question, is like, why didn't you pull her aside? So they said because she didn't hesitate and didn't like hem and haw or look down, if there had been even any kind of delay, then maybe that could have upped the threshold. I said, why didn't that SRO write an individual report? Shouldn't he have? And it's tough because here we are Monday morning quarterbacking, but that's what we must do to make sure it doesn't happen again, right? I mean, it's trying to figure out all those things. So the state apparently came back and they released, when we asked DCS, they said in 2022, they gave us a whole, first they were radio silent, and that was super frustrating for, in our job is to ask questions of people in power and figure out what went wrong on your watch. And we don't know who's to blame here. We don't know what went wrong in the system. Clearly, the two people who are at fault here are behind bars right now, facing allegations, allegedly. So I guess the question here, DCS sent to us, and they said in Arizona, the ARS 8455 was changed in 2022, and the language was changed from unreasonable risk of harm to substantial risk of harm. So they said general allegations of bad parenting do not rise to the level of meeting report criteria. If a call doesn't meet that criteria, it's placed into a separate category. Unit supervisor can review it for a second time to ensure that nothing was missed. But they're saying, if you didn't witness the abuse and the child isn't calling it abuse, and girlfriend seems to have an excuse for it, does that rise to the level of abuse? I don't know. But then other law enforcement sources are take a global look at it. You have how many bullet points on your timeline of the same MO? There's something that's obviously wrong, and they have an excuse. The child corroborates the excuse, but bears physical evidence of something wrong happening. So isn't it the preponderance of evidence or the totality of the circumstances that should raise an even greater red flag? So I mentioned the time when we're hearing that it was in the fall of last year. I think you heard about this as well. So multiple sources have talked about this, and Phoenix PD has not yet released all of the reports of the times that their officers went and had contact with these families, but they did give us a whole list of dates and kind of what was founded or unfounded, forwarded to DCS. And they said all of their calls were forwarded to DCS. But apparently, Rebekah runs away. I kind of gave you a synopsis earlier, shows up at a Quick Trip, says, Dad's girlfriend's abusing me. She ends up at PCH, and they did find some bruising. So doctors are talking to her, police are talking to her. There are photographs taken. And I'm told that you could see some bruising, but it's not like a black eye. It's not like, bruising around the neck or anything, that there was some bruising. But then Anicia had something like she self-harms and the bruise pattern was kind of inconsistent or what. So we've made public record requests, Federal Information Act, public records requests to get the body cam footage of that SRO, house visit of the still photographs of her bruising in that Phoenix Children's Hospital. It's like, why did a criminal investigation not get started? It's real frustrating because how many times do you hope, okay, DCS is already locked into this family, so they might have a little bit more of a background on it. So I can understand how detectives might be like, okay, DCS already knows this family, they're locked in, they're on it, so maybe we should ease up a bit. But if there's evidence of criminal activity,
I know, and it's tough. Yeah, in talking to some investigators, they said basically under state law, mandatory reporting, you either report to police or to DCS. That's what's required. And in a lot of these situations, they feel like DCS should take lead because they're the ones who reunified the family. They're the ones that have the most information on the parents and the kids. But sort of the concerning part of this, too, was in talking to the school, they mentioned that all three of these kids were groomed, that they knew what to say. They knew they had been trained to act like everything was their fault, that their parents weren't responsible for anything. And in the rare situation where the parents would say something, they would say, they acted up and this was for discipline. But sort of, another surprising thing about this was visiting the home where they lived here in Phoenix. Neighbors talked about seeing these kids run laps around the block. That was how they were disciplined in part, until they would basically collapse, is what school administrators said. And these neighbors didn't take any issue with it. They thought, hey, they're running laps because that's how the parents are disciplining them for bad behavior, And then some other neighbors mentioned that they saw groceries, coming into the house. So they assumed, even though the kids looked really thin, that they were being fed. So it sort of makes you shake your head, like, how did all of this happen? And we know that there were a lot of reports, but it just seems like people saw these kids. Why weren't there even more reports?
I feel like it's disingenuous on the part of DCS as well when we asked them, hey, the school says they called 13 times, and they come back at us and say, oh, in the last year, we only got 5 calls from the school, and one of them merited investigation. But they didn't say, In the totality of this family's history with DCS, we've had 40 calls. I don't know the exact number. It's impossible to know that unless they disclose that to us. But I've heard from others. It's calls from police. It's calls from the school. It's calls from the preschool. It's calls from the hospital. It's calls from anonymous family members stuff. I'm told it's dozens of calls. So for them to just be like, oh, we got 5 calls, that's very disingenuous and offensive, actually. So the governor, we asked her because she has a history in case management. So this should be, it hits her close to home. And she said this week that she's called for a hearing with the state. It's the DCS Oversight Committee stakeholder meeting. That's coming up September 3rd. She says she wants answers. Here's the thing, Amy. We need answers. So we just had a story January of 2024 on a state audit. The DCS hasn't implemented 48 of the 58 recommendations from a recent audit. This is a $1.2 billion agency that is not following through with the checks and balances that need to have. So we talked about every time we have a child death that breaks your heart and you're like, what happened? Everyone gets up in arms. We want answers. And we're like, never again. So like Jessie Shockley, the 5-year-old girl who it's believed she was thrown out in a dumpster, ended up in the Butterfield landmine, and they never found her remains. But her mom is doing life behind bars because of a history of chronic abuse. That was a DCS case. At the time, that was like the precursor for CPS getting morphed into DCS. And in 2014, everybody said, all eyes, DCS is going to fix this problem. Our kids are going to be taken care of. Then we had the Amy Deal case. Then we had the 2 Mesa teens who went missing from a group home and found dead. We had Emily Pike, who was left a group home, found dismembered on the freeway. Then we had Zariah Dodd, the 16-year-old pregnant teen, found murdered in a park. So many things. And every case is different. Every case is different. I totally get that. And these caseworkers are overloaded. There is a severe staffing shortage. I get all of that. But what can we do on our watch to say enough? What can we do? I mean, there was a law that was just passed 2 years ago after the 2 teens were found dead outside, like when they left that Mesa group home. And it was like, the state needs to do more. Police need to do more. They're mandated within 48 hours to put out a photograph of any missing endangered teen, and put it on their social media. They're not doing those basic bare minimums. And here's the thing, like they're even supposed to be potentially issuing, they probably can't do Amber Alerts because you have to have somebody who's witnessed the abduction or kidnapping, but they can do Silver Alerts because these kids are considered at risk. So the bottom line here, and obviously Rebekah wasn't reported missing, but the bottom line is these are already children on the radar for being at risk. They were taken from their home for a reason. And this whole reunification process, we want to believe that parents can get rehabbed, whether it's alcohol, drugs, whatever. We want to have hope that those kids can be returned to their biological parents. It's what kids want. And we want to support that when it's healthy, when it's right. But we have to keep coming back and checking. And certainly, if advocates, dozens of them, are coming to that child's defense saying, hey, something's not right here, we've got to be careful about following through with that, figuring out.
I know. And in speaking to one investigator, it sort of makes you wonder, maybe you mandate that you report this to DCS and to police. So that way you have 2 separate entities that are investigating these cases, and you have records that they're both keeping on things. I know police, you speak to a lot of police departments, though. There's shortages of officers. They say they're not trained for some of these family matters, but it certainly begs the question, what more? Because certainly, the concern is that Rebekah's case is not alone. And you just listed off several cases that have all happened within the last few years.
I was told that of those Phoenix PD, the 5 instances that they're aware of, going back to 2018, although I was told that 2018 had a footnote saying we have 4 previous contacts with the same family. 9 calls before that, 2018. So that just shows you that they have a history with this family, that every single one of those were flagged with a Family Investigations Bureau detective who reviewed it, who called DCS. So they're doing that. But the question then becomes, like, I go back to Gabby Petito. That body cam footage has been used in training in law enforcement across the board since then. It's like, ouch. You know, in the moment, did they do what was legally required of them? Yeah, they separated the two of them at the scene. And she's saying what he said. She was hysterical and, you know, and it was her fault or what. But that taught us, like, even though the law requires you do X, what does your gut tell you? What does your gut tell you? And it was so eerie because on that body cam footage from the Gabby Petito thing, one of the, I can't remember if it's deputy or trooper or what, said, well, we just don't want this to turn up being like, you know, we don't want this, one of them ending up dead down the road or something along those lines. And it was like said so flippantly, like, oh, that would be terrible if that were to happen. So let's just make sure we dot the I's and cross the T's. And it's like, when you're dealing with children, maybe the body cam footage from the SRO and also the preponderance of this girthy case file, whether it's sitting on the desk of CPS or it's sitting on the desk of PPD or what, it's like, at what point does that become part of the training? Like, you can't look at each case as a silo. Like, in this one instance, do we have enough to go with more? But this smells like what happened 6 months ago, what happened 4 months ago, what happened a year and a half ago. And then you get a bigger picture of like, can we dig a little deeper? It's tough. I don't like Monday morning quarterbacking it, but if there's something that we can learn from it, let's figure it out.
I know. And you know, there was some talk too that I had heard that some of these complaints, and we don't have the complaints from DCS yet, but that some of the complaints that were made were not put into their file, and that the family court judge who oversaw this case wasn't able to see those complaints. And so you wonder, had all of that made it into their file, would the judge have found that they shouldn't have stayed with their father and his girlfriend?
We had, I'm trying to remember what year it was, but the state suspended placements because it was proven that there was a problem with their tracking system, their data tracking system. So we know for a fact that judges were not getting full court records, and they were making decisions, pivotal decisions, based on the most vulnerable humans in our community, these children who rely on adults to figure out their welfare. And if you have guardian ad litems who are saying, let's do this and let's do that, but you don't have records backing it up of like, here are these red flags, we've got 5 of them in this file, and if you're missing those file red flags, how are you going to know what's right? So the thing that troubled me when they suspended those placements and they said, we're going to get the court system figured out, we're going to get the data system figured out. They said, we're also going to go back and audit all the placements. I think it was either within the last 6 months or within the last year. They said, we're going to audit the placements in foster homes and in adoptive homes, but they did not say that they would audit reunifications, which if you ask any foster family advocate, any caseworker, those are the most volatile because there is absolute proof of pre-existing abuse or neglect. So that should reach the highest threshold for proof that they were, able and safe to go back to be a reunification, but none of those got audited.
And that's really concerning. It makes you wonder now. I would hope that they would go back and take another look at all of this. And I know there are a lot of cases, but especially, when the details of the situation that these kids were born into sounds like it was really tough. We know that the biological mother had a history of drug use, that she was never in the picture. Doesn't seem like other family members were sort of willing to step up because we know that these kids spent some substantial time in a foster home.
Yeah.
Then there was some reporting possibly that they were in group homes as well. So these kids have been through a lot.
Yeah. And I've also spoken with others in the foster care arena who've said they weren't unloved because there were foster care advocates who fought to stop the reunification, to say, I want to adopt these kids. And they were denied by the courts. So I'm hopeful that the judges moving forward will, do right by her brothers, because they are going to need a lot of help. I mean, I can't imagine what they saw, what was done to them, and what kind of healing they have on the horizon for them. And God bless those foster parents who are willing to say, I'm going to take in this, kid who comes with a lot of trauma baggage and still love them the best that I can, because it is a lot. I don't know.
But just infuriating that in this situation, there was a foster family who wanted to keep those kids. I should mention, we put in requests with DCS to get every complaint, every interaction they have with this family, notes from hotline workers regarding calls they took regarding this family, because they're saying, some of these reports didn't rise to the threshold of an investigator. And so we are still waiting on a lot of that. And we've put in requests for police records. So there's a lot of developments. And, there's a court case that will play out involving the dad and the girlfriend. They remain behind bars at this point. So we're going to continue to follow this closely, and we'll keep you posted on that. Thanks so much for joining us for this edition of the Arizona's Family Investigates podcast.
The Arizona's Family Investigates podcast, hosted by Amy Cutler and produced by Cody Lillick, and a production of Arizona's Family 3 TV, CBS 5, and azfamily.com in Phoenix, Arizona.